The forest was drenched in silver light, the full moon spilling across the canopy in ghostly ribbons. Every shadow seemed alive, shifting with whispered secrets that only she could feel. Leela's breath caught as a shiver traced her spine. Something was out there. Something that knew her. She pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the faint hum of a bond she had spent years denying. It had been silent for so long, buried beneath caution, fear, and a life built on secrecy. Yet now it throbbed insistently as though the moon itself demanded she acknowledge it. A rustle among the trees, she froze, the instinctive alert of a predator. An alpha tingled in her bones. She hadn't felt that pull in years. Not since the first night it had called to her, not since she had learned that bonds weren't always chosen. They were found, and some were inevitable. A voice, low and commanding, broke the stillness. "You shouldn't be here alone." Leela's heart leapt. She knew that tone, a mixture of authority, danger, and something else she wasn't ready to name. She wanted to run, to vanish into the darkness, but her feet rooted themselves to the soft forest floor. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every heartbeat whispered desire. I wasn't expecting anyone. She managed, her voice a fragile thread against the night. From the shadows he stepped forward. His presence filled the clearing, warm and suffocating all at once. Eyes like molten amber pinned her in place, searching, recognizing, recognition that both terrified and enthralled her. "You feel it too," he said, almost a statement, almost a question. His gaze softened for a moment, fleeting, before returning to the predatory alert she had seen in pack leaders and hunters alike. Leela's pulse thundered. The bond, it wasn't just a whisper anymore. It surged, an electric current threading through her very soul, demanding acknowledgement, demanding surrender, and yet, surrender was dangerous, so dangerous she had spent years hiding from it. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of wolves, of power, of something ancient and unavoidable. She wanted to speak, to warn him, to deny it, but no words came. Only the moon's secret whispers threading around them both, warning that change had arrived. And in that suspended moment, the air thick with possibility, Leela realized she could no longer ignore the pull of what she had hidden. The bond was awake, and so was the alpha who had unknowingly awoken it. Some truths she knew were impossible to hide forever. The echo of the alpha's presence lingered in Leela's senses long after he had disappeared into the forest. Her chest still tightened with the memory of those amber eyes so knowing, so commanding. She pressed her palms to her knees as she sat on the cold forest floor, trying to slow the rapid beat of her heart. Memories she had buried for years clawed their way to the surface. The first time she had felt the bond, a whisper of connection that had left her trembling and terrified. Her parents had warned her of the dangers of the pack, of the unseen threads that could tie her to someone she had never met. She had learned to hide, to suppress it, to bury herself in anonymity, and it had worked. Until now, her fingertips traced the scar on her wrist, a faint mark from a night she had tried to run from the bond's first stirrings. Back then, the world had been larger, scarier, and full of unknowns. She had been just a girl hiding in plain sight, and now, years later, that same fear had returned, but sharpened with the edge of desire and danger tangled together. Leela stood, brushing leaves from her jacket, and let the moonlight wash over her. The forest had always been a sanctuary, a place where she could feel the pull of her hidden self without the judgment of the pack. But tonight, even the trees seemed alive, watching, waiting, knowing more than she dared to admit. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a shadow at the edge of the clearing. Her pulse leapt, every nerve alert. Could it be him again, the alpha who had stirred her soul and shattered the careful walls she had built? No, she whispered to herself, shaking her head. I cannot let this happen, not again. But the bond would not be ignored. It throbbed beneath her skin, a silent drum of urgency that refused to be silenced. Every instinct she had honed over the years, the caution, the secrecy, the careful distance, felt suddenly fragile against the pull of something larger, something inevitable. She closed her eyes, breathing in the cool night air. Her mind wandered to the pack, to the life she had avoided. Faces blurred with memory, friends who had never known the truth, enemies who might exploit it, strangers whose curiosity could be dangerous. She had lived in the shadows of her own existence for years, keeping her secret safe, keeping her heart even safer. But the bond had awakened tonight, and with its awakening came a warning, a promise, and an undeniable truth. She could no longer hide. The past she had buried was reaching for her, dragging her toward a future she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Her ears twitched at a distant howl, low and haunting. A shiver traveled down her spine. It was both a threat and a lure, calling her to remember who she was, and who she was meant to be. Some shadows were not meant to be escaped. Some truths demanded to be faced. And tonight, Leela knew that the past and the present were colliding in ways she could not yet comprehend. The town had never felt so small. Every street lamp seemed dim compared to the intensity of the Alpha's presence. Leela felt it before she even saw him, a magnetic force that made the hairs on her arms rise, her heartbeat stutter, her breath catch. He arrived quietly, yet the world seemed to notice. People paused mid-step, conversations faltering, and even the wind seemed to shift in anticipation. When he stepped into the clearing near the edge of town, the moonlight painted him in shades of bronze and shadow. Every movement was precise, confident, undeniably alpha. Leela's chest tightened. She had spent years hiding her connection, convincing herself that she could remain invisible, that she could avoid the inevitable pull of fate. Yet now, fate had come dressed in the form of amber eyes and a commanding presence that made her pulse quicken. "You're here," she whispered under her breath, even though he was still far enough away not to hear. Her instinct screamed that the bond stirred stronger now, tugging insistently at the edges of her control. And then he saw her. The recognition in his gaze was almost unbearable. Not shock, not curiosity, but something far deeper, something that pricked at her soul like a forgotten melody. "You, he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of authority and a hint of disbelief. "You're here." Her fingers clenched at her sides. "I could say the same for you," she replied, voice barely above a whisper, but there was steel beneath the timbre. He stepped closer, and the air thickened. People around them seemed to fade, shadows swallowed by the intensity between them. The Alpha's gaze was unrelenting, scanning her like he could see every hidden thought, every carefully buried secret. I don't," she began, but the words faltered. How could she explain years of suppression, of hiding from something that had always been a part of her? He didn't need an explanation. He could feel it. She could see it in his expression, a mixture of recognition, disbelief, and something she wasn't ready to name. The town around them buzzed with normal life, unaware of the storm gathering in this small clearing. And yet, for Leela, nothing else existed. Nothing mattered but the pull between them, the invisible tether that refused to be ignored any longer. "You've been hiding," he murmured, voice rough, more to himself than to her. "I can feel it, but hiding won't save you." Her breath hitched. That simple statement, almost casual, cut deeper than any accusation or confrontation ever could. It revealed everything she had tried to conceal for years, the bond, the fear, the longing. And as the moonlight wrapped around them both, painting them in silver and shadow, Leela knew. There was no turning back. The Alpha had arrived, and so had the reckoning of the bond she had spent a lifetime concealing. The forest was quieter than usual, yet the tension in the air was palpable. Leela's senses were on high alert, every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of a branch amplifying the hum of the bond that pulsed through her veins. The Alpha's presence lingered still, though he had vanished from sight, leaving only the echo of his awareness in her mind. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to center herself. The bond was alive tonight, stronger, more insistent than ever before. It wasn't just a connection anymore. It was a force demanding recognition, urging her to embrace something she had spent years denying. Her hands tingled as she brushed past a low-hanging branch, a flicker of energy spilling into the air. The leaves trembled, rustling without wind. A sudden howl in the distance made her pulse spike, and she realized the forest had felt it too. Her power, her true self, was no longer hidden. The Alpha's senses were trained sharp. If he had been here, he would have known. he would have felt the strength she had carefully buried. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She was not helpless, not just a girl to be observed or protected, but a force of her own, and yet that power came with danger. "You're stronger than you know," a voice murmured from the shadows. She spun, startled, but found the forest empty. Only the moonlight remained, silver and cold. Was it a warning? Or just her mind playing tricks under the bond's insistence? Her pulse raced as she realized she had never fully tested the depths of her abilities. Every time she had tried, fear had reined her in. But now, something compelled her to step forward, to acknowledge what she had always been. The bond was no longer silent. It demanded awakening. Her heartbeat echoed in the clearing as she took a tentative step, letting her instincts guide her. The underbrush seemed to bend around her, shadows shifting as if bowing to her unspoken command. A thrill of power surged through her chest, and for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt alive, and then she felt him, not physically, but in the quiet insistence of the bond. The Alpha was near, somewhere in the veil between shadow and moonlight. He knew, he could sense her strength even if he hadn't seen it. A flicker of anxiety crossed her mind, sharp and immediate. Could she control it if he tried to draw closer? Could she stand as his equal? Her pulse surged, faster than the forest wind, faster than the moonlight spilling across the ground. She opened her eyes, daring to embrace the power she had hidden for so long. The bond hummed, approving, insistent. And deep in the shadows, unseen but present, the Alpha watched, every muscle taut, every instinct aware of the force he had only begun to understand. The game was no longer subtle. The bond had awakened. And so had the truth. She was far more dangerous and far more irresistible than anyone could have guessed. The pack gathering was in full swing, lanterns casting golden pools of light over the clearing. Leela moved quietly among the crowd, trying to blend in, her pulse still thrumming from the night's earlier stirrings in the forest. Every laugh, every whispered conversation seemed amplified tonight, each glance a reminder that she was always being observed. And then he arrived, the Alpha, every head turned, and the energy shifted as if the air itself acknowledged his presence. He moved with an effortless authority, amber eyes scanning the gathering, every movement precise, commanding. Leela felt the bond stir violently, almost painfully, and she reminded herself to stay calm, to hide, to protect the secret that had been her lifeline for years. She didn't expect him to notice her. She didn't expect the pang that struck her chest when his gaze briefly landed on her, an acknowledgement, fleeting and restrained, yet undeniable. And then, in front of everyone, he dismissed her. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his tone sharp, measured. The crowd seemed to lean in, waiting, watching, catching the subtle drama unfolding before them. Leela felt every eye on her, felt the sting of humiliation as whispers began to spread. I wasn't. She tried to explain, but his presence, authoritative and indifferent, left no room for defense. Words caught in her throat, swallowed by the weight of shame and the unexpected, burning rejection. Her cheeks burned as the gossip began to ripple through the pack. She had lived years hiding who she truly was, and now it felt as though everything was exposed. Her secret, her bond, her very identity, threatened by a single dismissal. Yet even in the sting of rejection, the bond pulsed insistently. It reminded her that this wasn't the end. It reminded her that the Alpha felt it too, even if he wouldn't admit it in front of everyone. She could feel the tension, the unspoken pull, simmering beneath his icy dismissal. She turned away, blending into the shadows, trying to hide her trembling hands and the tear that threatened to spill. Behind her, she could sense his gaze lingering, sharp and assessing, as if he were piecing together what she had worked so hard to conceal. A rival laughed nearby, loud and cruel, sensing the shift in power. Leela's lips pressed into a thin line, anger flaring beneath the surface of her embarrassment. She would not give them the satisfaction. She would not show weakness, but the bond would not be denied. Every thrum of it whispered in her veins, promising that rejection was temporary and desire, dangerous, consuming desire, was very much alive. As she slipped away from the crowd, she cast one last glance over her shoulder. The Alpha's eyes found hers again, brief and searing, and though he did not approach, she could feel the silent acknowledgement of something far deeper than social standing, far beyond the humiliation she had endured. Even after slipping away from the crowd, Leela couldn't shake the heat of his gaze. It lingered in her mind like a brand, searing through the shame and pulling at the bond she had spent years hiding. Every glance from him carried layers, recognition, authority, curiosity. And something forbidden, something dangerous. She moved through the forest edge, where the shadows thickened and the lantern light from the gathering faded. Here she could breathe, could let the pulse of her hidden power settle, if only for a moment. And yet, even in the solitude, she felt him. A presence that was not entirely physical, an awareness that threaded through the air, brushing against her skin, whispering of things they could not yet say. From behind a tree, his eyes caught hers again, the faintest spark of acknowledgement. Leela's stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to deny the pull, to maintain the careful distance that had kept her safe for so long. But the bond, alive and insistent, refused to let her retreat. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to look away, but he shifted subtly, a shadow moving closer without breaking the silent communication. Their connection was unspoken, yet undeniable. Each glance was a conversation they dared not voice aloud. Questions, challenges, promises all wrapped into fleeting eye contact. A leaf rustled, startling her, and she felt the bond react, tingling along her spine like an electric charge. His presence was a tether, pulling her toward something she could not yet name. And beneath it all, the unspoken truth simmered. The bond had awoken, and it was not meant to be ignored. She forced herself to take a step back, to regain control, but even in retreat, she couldn't deny the thrill of proximity, the dangerous attraction that simmered in every subtle movement, every shared glance. The world outside the forest seemed to disappear, leaving only them, the bond, and the tension that threatened to break all rules she had carefully followed for years. For a moment, they simply stared, two forces circling each other in silence, until the Alpha's jaw tightened, a subtle flicker of restraint passing over his features. And then, almost imperceptibly, he stepped back into the shadows, leaving her alone, but not untouched. The bond pulsed, warning her, tempting her, reminding her that no matter how hard she tried to hide, nothing could stay hidden forever. The game had changed, the rules were shifting, and the forbidden attraction, slow, burning and relentless, was far from over. The morning after the gathering was deceptively calm. The forest glistened with dew, sunlight spilling through the branches in golden shards, but Leela's nerves were anything but serene. The bond throbbed beneath her skin, insistent and restless, warning her that her carefully hidden life was beginning to unravel. She moved cautiously through the trees, senses alert to every sound, every shift in the shadows. She had spent years guarding her secret, the bond that tied her soul to the Alpha, the power she had learned to suppress. But it was no longer something she could control entirely. Someone somewhere had begun noticing. A rustle in the underbrush made her spin. A rival pack member emerged, eyes sharp and calculating. He had always been perceptive, always watched the edges of her life with a predator's patience. Now he was close enough to sense the tremor of power she tried to mask. "You've been hiding something," he said casually, but the edge in his tone made her heart leap. Something unnatural. Leela's pulse quickened, the forest suddenly feeling smaller, constrictive, as though the trees themselves leaned in to listen. "I don't know what you mean," she said, keeping her voice steady, though her hands itched to form a protective shield. He smirked, tilting his head as if he already knew the truth. "Oh, I think you do, and I think the Alpha knows too, or at least he will." A cold dread settled over her chest. The Alpha, he would notice, he had always noticed. The bond, once hidden, now throbbed openly, leaving nothing to conceal. Leela's mind raced, calculating, strategizing. She had to protect herself, her secret, her very life. And yet, she could feel the Alpha's awareness threading through the distance, subtle but undeniable. He was near, even if not visible, even if he had not spoken. Every instinct told her that he could sense her danger, that he could intervene, but at what cost? The rival leaned closer, his eyes gleaming with curiosity and malice. "You're playing a dangerous game," he murmured, before melting back into the shadows as silently as he had appeared. Leela exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay grounded. The forest seemed to pulse around her, the bond thrumming in synchrony with her racing heart. Secrets could only remain hidden for so long. Someone had begun to unravel them, and once started, there was no stopping the truth from spilling into the open. The Alpha's presence, subtle yet undeniable, brushed against her consciousness. She could feel him thinking, watching, calculating. His instincts were alive, attuned to the same threads of power that had been stirred by the rival's intrusion. The stakes had shifted. The hidden bond she had protected for years was no longer hers alone, and the closer she came to the Alpha, the more dangerous the exposure became. The clearing was deceptively quiet, the golden afternoon light slipping through the treetops. Leela's footsteps were soft against the mossy ground, but she felt eyes on her, the weight of someone's scrutiny pressing against her like a physical force. She stopped, sensing it before she saw him, the rival, bold and smug, emerging from the shadows with a predator's confidence. "You've been hiding more than I thought," he said, voice low, teasing, dangerous. "Power, secrets, a bond. And it's not just any bond, is it?" Leela's pulse surged. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, to flee, but the Alpha's presence thrummed just beyond the tree line, steady and commanding. She could feel him watching, every muscle taut with tension, every instinct on alert. The bond pulsed sharply in her veins, warning her that this confrontation was more than a simple challenge. It was a test, and the Alpha would notice every move she made. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, keeping her tone calm, hiding the tremor in her hands. But he stepped closer, and the air around her thickened with threat. "You don't have to lie to me," he said, smirking. "The Alpha's scent is all over you, he feels it, and so do I." Her breath caught. The Alpha's presence surged suddenly, closer, like a storm gathering on the horizon. She felt him step into the clearing silently, his gaze locking onto the rival with a lethal precision that made the forest itself seem to hold its breath. "Step away," the Alpha said, voice low but charged with authority. Every word vibrated through the air like a warning. The rival froze, smirk faltering under the weight of that gaze, sensing for the first time that this wasn't just about secrets or power. This was about territory, possession, and the unspoken bond that had tied Leela to the Alpha for years. Leela's chest tightened as the Alpha moved closer, placing himself subtly between her and the threat. Protective, possessive, undeniable. The rival's eyes flickered between them, a mix of frustration and jealousy boiling under his calm exterior. "You're playing a dangerous game," the Alpha said, his voice carrying both warning and promise. "This ends now." The rival took a step back, tension rippling through him, but it was clear this challenge was far from over. Leela's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the awareness of the Alpha's nearness. The silent claim he was staking over her without a word, without ceremony, yet more binding than any formal declaration. For a moment, the three of them stood in charged silence, the forest holding its breath, and then, without another word, the rival melted back into the shadows, leaving only the whisper of his intent lingering like smoke. Leela exhaled shakily, her knees weak, yet the bond pulsed stronger than ever, warning her that the Alpha's attention was no longer gentle observation. It was a force, commanding and protective, tethering her to him in ways she had never allowed herself to acknowledge before. The moon hung low and full, casting silver light across the forest floor, turning the shadows into long, twisting shapes. Leela walked alone, her breath visible in the crisp night air, but she was not truly alone. The bond hummed through her veins, insistent, alive, tethering her to the Alpha, even when he was not physically present. She stopped at a clearing, where the trees arched like silent sentinels. Her chest tightened, the weight of all the nights she had spent denying the bond pressing on her heart. She had hidden her feelings, hidden her power, hidden herself. But the bond refused to remain silent any longer. "I can't. I can't keep pretending," she whispered into the night, voice barely audible above the rustle of leaves. "I've been trying to hide from you, from us, but it's impossible." A soft shift in the shadows announced his arrival before he spoke. "No pretending is necessary," the Alpha said, his voice low, commanding, yet tender in a way that made her knees weak. "You've been hiding for years, but I've felt it all along. The bond, the power, and yes, the longing." Her heart skipped, heat rushing to her cheeks. She wanted to deny it, wanted to shield herself from the intensity of the moment, but the truth was raw and undeniable. "I try to run," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought if I stayed hidden, if I stayed small, it would protect me, protect us." The Alpha stepped closer, each movement deliberate, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. His amber eyes softened as they fixed on hers. "You don't need to hide from me," he murmured. "You never did. I've felt you. Even when you tried to vanish." Her breath caught. The bond throbbed between them, vibrant and electric, tethering their souls in ways neither could deny. Every hesitation, every fear, every suppressed desire surged to the surface in that silver, lit clearing. Leela began, but the words faltered. She was vulnerable, exposed, yet strangely safe. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, fingers grazing her skin with gentle insistence. "Say nothing," he whispered, voice almost a caress. "Just feel it. Let it be what it is." The pull between them was undeniable, a force older than time itself. And as they stood there, hearts echoing each other, Leela realized that the bond was no longer hers alone. It had awakened, and it demanded acknowledgement, not from words, but from surrender, from recognition, from the silent promise of what was to come. The forest was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and distant danger. Leela's senses were screaming, every hair on her body standing on end. The bond pulsed like a warning drum in her veins, vibrating with the Alpha's presence as if he were right beside her. Though he remained hidden, watching, waiting, ready, a rustle of leaves, sharper this time, made her spin. A figure emerged from the shadows, the rival from before, eyes glinting with malice, teeth bared in a predatory grin. He had not come merely to observe this time, he had come to strike. "You've been hiding too much," he sneered. "Power, secrets, and the Alpha's attention, that bond is mine to exploit." Leela's pulse raced, but the fear was tempered by the thrumming insistence of the bond. It flared with protective energy, warning her that she was not alone. The Alpha surged forward, a shadow materializing at the edge of the clearing, his amber eyes locked on the threat, every muscle taut with lethal intent. "You will step away," the Alpha growled, voice low and dangerous. The rival faltered for a heartbeat, uncertainty flickering across his face, but it was brief. He lunged, teeth snapping, claws reaching. Leela reacted instinctively, her hidden strength breaking through years of restraint. Energy pulsed from her, sharp and commanding, and the rival stumbled back, caught off guard. The forest seemed to respond to her will, the wind swirling, branches twisting, shadows stretching as if alive. The Alpha moved with predatory grace, intercepting the rival with precise, controlled force. Claws met claws, growls cut through the night, and the tension between them crackled like lightning. Leela watched, heart pounding, as she realized something undeniable. Together, they were stronger than anyone had anticipated. The rival snarled, his pride wounded, and retreated into the shadows with a final, warning glance. Leela sank to her knees, chest heaving, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The Alpha approached, his presence overwhelming yet grounding. His eyes softened, the lethal edge giving way to something deeper, more intimate. "You're stronger than I imagined," he murmured, his fingers brushing hers in a fleeting, electrifying touch, "and more dangerous than you realize, but I'll protect you." Her breath caught, every instinct, every beat of her heart told her the truth she had been hiding for years. She wasn't just his bond, she was his equal, and together they were unstoppable. Yet the forest still held whispers of danger, and the rival's shadow lingered in her mind. The bond between them pulsed fiercely, a reminder that trust, loyalty, and the unspoken connection they shared were their only defense against the darkness threatening to claim them. The moon hung low over the clearing, silver light spilling across the forest like a spotlight on destiny. Leela's heart pounded, a rhythm she no longer tried to control. The events of the night, the rival's attack, the surging bond, the Alpha's protective presence, had pushed everything to the edge, and now, the moment she had both feared and longed for had arrived. He stepped forward, each movement deliberate, every step radiating authority and unshakable confidence. The Alpha's amber eyes locked on hers, burning with recognition, need, and something unspoken yet undeniable. "This bond, it cannot be ignored," he said, voice low, powerful, carrying over the quiet of the forest. "It's been here all along, tethering us together, whether you wanted it or not. And I claim it, I claim you." Leela's breath hitched. Every word struck her like lightning, igniting the hidden desires she had kept buried for so long. Her pulse raced, her body trembling, and the bond pulsed violently, thrumming between them like an electric current. "You," she began, but words failed her. She had spent years hiding, denying, running from this truth, and yet now, under the full moon and the Alpha's unwavering gaze, surrender felt both terrifying and inevitable. He closed the distance between them, and the air crackled with the tension of unspoken promises. When his hand brushed hers, it was both a question and a declaration, a gentle yet firm assertion of the claim he had spoken aloud. "You don't have to fight it anymore," he murmured, voice softer now, almost tender. "I'll keep you safe. I'll keep this bond safe, but you are mine, Leela, always." The words settled over her like a warm fire, melting away years of fear, hesitation, and self-imposed isolation. She could feel the truth of it in every thrum of the bond, in every pulse of her own heart. She was his, and he was hers. Tears pricked her eyes as she finally allowed herself to step closer, closing the space between them. Their hands entwined, the bond surging stronger than ever, threading through their very souls, binding them in ways that could not be broken. For the first time in years, Leela felt whole, seen, and irrevocably claimed. The Alpha's lips brushed hers in a fleeting, electric kiss, not just passion, but a promise, a declaration, and the culmination of everything that had led them to this moment. And in that instant, the world fell away, leaving only the two of them, the bond blazing brightly, and the undeniable truth that their destinies were now entwined. The clearing had transformed under the first light of dawn. Moonlight faded to gold, and the forest, once shrouded in tension and shadows, now shimmered with calm. Leela stood beside the Alpha, hand in hand, the bond between them thrumming gently, a steady pulse of power, trust, and love. The pack had gathered at the edge of the clearing, murmurs spreading as they recognized the bond that had long been hidden. Eyes that had once doubted, judged, or whispered, now softened with acceptance. The Alpha's presence was commanding, undeniable, and protective. Yet he allowed Leela to step forward, proud and radiant, showing the world that she was not just his mate, but a force in her own right. She felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the steady strength of his hand in hers. The bond hummed with approval, flowing through her, filling her with a sense of belonging she had never known she could have. Her powers, long suppressed, now blended seamlessly with the Alpha's energy, a perfect balance of strength, trust, and destiny. "You've done it," he murmured, amber eyes softening. "You've embraced everything you are, and everything we are together." Leela's lips curved into a smile, the kind that came from deep within, from a heart finally unburdened. "I didn't realize I could ever be this. Free," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion, "not just because of the bond, but because of you." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his thumb tracing her cheek tenderly. "You never needed to hide. You were always meant to stand beside me, to claim your place, not just as my mate, but as the power you were born to wield." The pack bowed, a silent gesture of acknowledgement and acceptance, their previous doubts dissolved in the wake of undeniable truth. Leela's eyes met the Alpha's again, and in that glance, all the pain, fear, and hesitation melted away, leaving only a profound certainty. Together, they turned toward the rising sun, the bond between them a living, breathing thing, threading through every heartbeat, every glance, every touch. Leela finally understood what it meant to be whole, not hidden, not restrained, but fully embraced by love, power, and destiny. The forest around them seemed to sigh in approval, a gentle wind stirring the leaves as if celebrating the balance of power and passion, protection and freedom. And for the first time in her life, Leela felt entirely at home, entirely herself, and entirely his. The Alpha pressed a lingering kiss to her temple, then captured her lips in a soft, unyielding kiss of promise and eternity. The world was theirs, the bond unbreakable, and their destiny finally fulfilled.